Hi, this is Aashutosh, CEO here at Aiydec, the company behind Zinia, which is the world's first self-serve AI platform for business users. And I have with me today Dr. Alessandro Abate, who is a professor of AI at Oxford University. And he also serves as the chief scientist here at Aiydec. So welcome, Alessandro. Great to be talking to you today. And, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Ash. Uh, Hello, everyone. My name is Alessandro Abate, and I'm Professor of Verification and Control in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Oxford here in the UK. I've been active in research in areas such as verification, control, machine learning, and AI for about 20 years. And my interests are in the integration of model-based mathematical techniques and data-driven algorithms from machine learning and AI. I find it fascinating to bridge the gap between academic research, which is what I do, in AI and machine learning, with industry-relevant applications of AI-driven decision-making. And so I think it's great to be translating my work directly into Zinia's technological solution.
Great. So, we're going to be talking about Xenia in more details and the technology behind it a little bit as well. But before we get into that, I thought it would be good to tell everyone a little bit about our company and the platform itself. At Aiydec, we engineer softwares that build AI solutions backwards from business objectives and KPIs to models and data. And that we have found is the fastest way to value monetize from AI. So our platform, Zinia, is a no-code, no AI design platform that lets non-technical users basically build AI for their business processes, and thereby it kind of lets AI flourish through the organization, if you may. So with that kind of context, maybe we should talk about a little bit on what are the cornerstones for such a product? What type of things need to be thought through when you're building such a product like Xenia? And I think since Xenia is trying to free AI from technical silos of the organization and make it accessible to the organization and business users, I think simplicity is one of the core features, right? What do you think about that, Alessandro?
I fully agree with you. Accessibility and simplicity are core values, and we translate these core values into the product through flexibility and through the notion of information extraction. So let me be a bit more precise here. At the end of the day, a business user really cares about the way that they can use data to make informed decisions. So data availability and expense has evidently increased exponentially in recent times. But the fundamental question is, how do you actually extract enhanced, useful, tailored information, if you will, from this deluge of data? So if machine learning has to be truly transformative around customer experience, then an information extraction that is tailored to the user is evidently critical. And precise information extraction can enable, can lead to decisions that are timely and to prescriptions that can be critical and radically fundamental for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, to truly make AI accessible and simple to use for everyone within the organization, it needs to simply start talking the language of business processes, right? And of course, the way Xenia tries to achieve this is by following a radically different approach, as in building AI backwards from business KPIs, and that way forcing business objectives into the mix of things. Now, I always think if data and AI tools cannot influence and indeed optimize business KPIs, then they are clearly being used in a very limited sense, right? I mean, AI has the potential to integrate into every business person's day-to-day processes over time. But at the same time, we are clearly not talking about everyone to be a data scientist, because that learning curve would be very steep. So how do we simplify AI build processes to fill this gap? I think that's a key question, right?
It is a core question that we've been thinking about for a long time at Aiydec. And again, we want to translate accessibility and simplicity into being able to come up with an interplay of flexible AI build processes and a focus on information extraction, as I said before. So Zinia achieves this by focusing and really starting from business KPIs and then automating the model build processes and optimizing decision making according to what are the business constraints and the business objectives. Furthermore, as fundamental design principles, the AI built for decision makers needs to have adaptability. Adaptability to time and to the decisions that are, and to the actions that are taken. And of course, again, a clear focus on extracting information, leading to end-to-end transparency and explainability, which are two fundamental concepts that we'll elaborate upon shortly.
Great, great, great. So, and just to give an example of business KPIs, we're talking about things like net returns or ROI, depending on the business problem, because ultimately that is what business users care about, right? And I think what's important to highlight here is there are some fundamental processes like in AI build, like data cleaning, standardization, variable and algorithm selection, and there are parts of it, if not the full parts, that can be delegated to the machine, right? Whereas the business users can focus about their decision quality outcomes and the value add to their KPIs, making sure that's sound and safe. And of course, for a platform like Zinia, which is talking to business users, the user interface and reporting, that needs to be really effective and simple as well. So it needs to talk about the language that they understand, which is, again, business objectives, the constraints that they invariably have in the problems they're trying to solve for, and then, of course, the decision quality and precision over time, because, there are many ways you can go wrong over time, and you want to keep a good eye on that. Now, if we take a step back, perhaps, so one thing that I think has been inspiring AI researchers across for a long period of time is this concept of a general decision-making machine, right? And Zinia, of course, is I would say, a focused version of this within the context of the use cases it's solving for. But any thoughts here on the general aspect of a decision-making machine?
Of course. So, as we said before, a key component of Zinia is flexibility. Flexibility to what the user case goals and constraints are, and information extraction of the data that is shared, that is entered into Zinia. Now, this information extraction enables users and customers to make decisions. So we go from extracting information to making decisions. And for the purpose of general decision making, Zinia encompasses a few important aspects. Of course, it employs being flexible and adapted, possible prior knowledge and information whenever available, of course, that comes from the customers, that comes from the users, to enhance this information extraction, to squeeze as much information out of this data, to optimize such extraction information. And this is done through flexible algorithms that pre-process such data, that tailor the data to the use and to the users, of course. It then updates such knowledge through models, and in particular, it adapts through time. So if data encompasses time series that vary, then Zinia is able to adapt to time variations, if possible.
Mm, mm,
And this leads to eliciting, in a way that is automated, decisions or solutions, if you will, or action selections that is based on this evidence, this information that has been created and adapted through time. And the models that Zinia uses evidently adapt to not only time, but the actions, the decisions that have been taken, which might affect the data that is further produced. So there's adaptability not only to time, but sort of self-adaptability to the decisions that have been taken.
mhm.
So this is all about flexibility, information extraction, and adaptability.
Mm, absolutely. It's, some really great points there. And again, to embrace a more adaptable and flexible version of AI, which is closer to organization, um, you need to have clearly defined outcomes and controls in place, right, over time. And this perhaps translates into, automating the parts of an AI build process that can be and should be automated. So I talked about all the pre-processing steps. That's what I mean by that. But then kind of having that as a basis to truly build new applications which are more customer centric, redesign business processes based on hyper personalization and bringing out the right offers at the right time for customers, right? So it kind of acts as the bedrock uh, from where organizations can adapt and be more sort of customer centric, if you will, right? Great. So Alessandro, I think what follows from that discussion from Zinia as an AI platform for business users is some key principles of AI being accessible to everyone, simplicity that delivers that accessibility, flexibility, adaptability over time and over decisions, as you quite rightly point out, and also explainability, which is kind of cuts across the whole piece, right? So, I think it'll be good to touch a little bit on the technological aspects of these principles as well, so that we can kind of start to understand what it takes to make a product like Zinia come to life, right?
That's great. So technology is important, and we try to translate between science, pure algorithms, and products through technology, right? So the most important part, I think, involves simplification of the AI, so that it becomes more accessible for customers, for real-world use cases, for as many organizations as possible, right? Um, so from a technological standpoint, simplicity means automation, right? You don't need to have a PhD in computer science to be able to operate Zinia.
Mm,
That's a fundamental part. And we want to automate all the parts of the AI build process that can or should be naturally automated, right? So as data comes in from customers, from users, from businesses, this raw data needs to be cleaned, normalized, and really massaged so that it gets ready for analysis, for modeling, and for automated handling, if you will. So, of course, we deal with aspects such as feature building, feature selections, choice of algorithms that depend on the nature of the data that comes in. So we try to be as generalistic as possible,
mm,
as adapted as possible, as flexible as possible to the customer's needs and uses, right? We do hyperparameter fine-tuning in a way that is automated, so there's no um, uh, selection of these hyperparameters that needs to be done by hand. So all the models that run under the hood of Zinia are essentially doing so in a way that is automated, right, to
mm,
the largest extent possible. And added to that, we have some pre-built control mechanisms for managing, of course, possible bias and variance. So accuracy and precision, if you will, that comes from our statistical algorithms. And finally, the model builds is done within an integrated framework. Think of, for example, reinforcement learning as a possible generalistic architecture where the algorithm not only deliver predictions about future events, but in fact try to make informed decision, if you will, optimal decision, optimal according to some goals, to some metrics, if you will, that are of course indicated by the users, by the customers. And actions are chosen according to such metrics, to such goals, to such objectives and goals. And by doing so, we start to build a general AI toolbox that, in fact, even non-technical people can simply use and access.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And if this is all presented through a user interface which speaks the language of business KPIs to begin with, uh, and also delivers ROIs, as the final outputs over time, the thing is, this needs to go beyond semantics, and actually, Zinia or an AI platform for business users should be able to quantifiably track and optimize these business objectives. I think it could not just be used for decisioning, but also for business planning processes, right? And what if you add that to all the automation and flexibility of algorithms that you mentioned in your previous section, if you add this such a user friendly interface, I think what we start to get is a simple AI platform that business users can harness on their business processes. But I often wonder whether making it simple or flexible, are they like counter goals? So in a sense, does simplicity come at the cost of flexibility for business users?
Well, not necessarily. I argued that that's not the case, certainly not for Zinia. So flexibility within AI-based decision-making and decision frameworks is mostly dealing about the data that you have and the algorithms that you use. Often businesses don't have enough data, so flexible AI platforms should allow for scaling up or down data requirements to build the models that then allow to make decisions. And this would let the users build initial solutions even when there's limited data availability, and then improve on those solutions as more data gets into play. And as the underlying AI algorithms are learning, are adapting, if you will, then they can improve over these initial solutions as more data becomes available over time. They can adapt to time, as we said before. Also, sometimes the user wants to embed in prior knowledge before this learning process kicks in. And as we mentioned before, Zinia allows for that. So a flexible AI platform should have approaches built in for model-based and model-free methods, and use whatever makes sense for the application under study. Finally, when data labeling becomes a challenge, it should allow for the choice between supervised or unsupervised algorithms.
Certainly. And, I think that leads to me a thought that you can almost also detach the data layer from the modeling layer, right? And in the modeling layer, you mentioned these options of supervised, unsupervised, or model-based, model-free. But essentially, they are driven also through the availability or differentiation of data that organizations have. And to some degree, the flexibility there is quite important too, right? And for business users to be able to use a platform like Zinia for their different type of use cases, I think it kind of comes down to a certain extent to for Zinia to be able to handle low or high volumes of data, because a lot of times you simply don't have a lot of data. But then that doesn't mean that you don't get data over time. So once you get that, how do you, ability for Zinia to be able to take that, and we talked about that a little bit as well through something like reinforcement learning could be a good technique for that. But it's about like volumes of data, variety of data. Sometimes it could be not labeled, sometimes it could be labeled. Different formats that we all know exist, needs to be harnessed, and Zinia should be able to use those. And also kind of like velocities, right? So some decisions in businesses are real-time decisions, and you need to dynamically have processes that extract data, push through the models and the decision optimization frameworks and deliver decisions in real time, versus some are more batch decisions and slow moving ones. So it's kind of like a potpourri, if you like, of all of these options that need to be present from a data standpoint as well in Zinia, right?
Yes, flexibility is a fundamental aspect. And flexibility involves essentially leveraging, tapping into a library of possible models and algorithms that are called upon depending on what we need to do, how much data we have, what the goals are, right? And when we need to deliver such decisions in real time, possibly. So flexibility with the speed of AI-driven decisioning, beyond having enhanced processing power, and really instead relying on the choice, the algorithmic choice and the algorithmic solutions, lead to other aspects and factors that I think are important for Zinia, such as explainability and adaptability, which are prerequisite, I think, for many business users. So explainability in AI should be seen as explainability either of the data that you've entered in the tool, of the derived models and decisions that you've made, so the actions you've taken, and finally explainability of customer experience, how the customer, how the users interact with the software, right? What they get out of the software, how they are guided through decision making, how they're guided through the explanation of the data they've entered in Zinia. So the data needs to be cleaned, normalized, and handled for possible missing values. An approach for reducing dimensionality should be established to look at most significant entry fields. And this is something that needs to be improved iteratively through algorithms, selecting the most important variables for each model, and through time, of course. So Zinia has a version of this that is automated and that does variable selection in a way that is under the hood. Explainability of models and decisions then is easier to achieve as we can assign metrics to such decisions, right? And feed these metrics back to the users as a sort of a quality measure, if you will. So our decisions come with assurances, right? With certificates, if you will. So then, furthermore, explainability of customer experience is about determining which factors are more important for a customer experience, and using AI to select these factors and to guide the users in their interaction with the tool. So let me give you a naive example, right, of say a customer that applies for a personal loan online. And let's assume that there's a Zinia-like tool that does this, right? Now, if we were to be able to dynamically adapt your tool to the way that the customer enters data, to the way that the customer experiences the tool, as it interacts with the data, as it enters the data, if you could, for example, ask the user to enter specific data that is more important for the tool to take decisions, then evidently the customer experience will be enhanced, right? You would waste less time, right? You would lead the customer through the process in a more quickly and seamless way, right? So then we would like to make this customer experience enhanced on the go as the customer interacts with the tool, both for faster decision making and in the end for better customer experience, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great example, Alessandro. It's kind of truly interacting with the customer through the processes underpinned by AI. And this is kind of things like this will truly help AI scale across the organization, as business users would be able to improve their processes fundamentally. And we've gone through this before, but flexibility and explainability kind of are the bedrocks for such a platform to deliver on the promise. Naturally, for ensuring great quality of decisions over time, self-adaptability is I would say a final piece, right? That needs to be sorted, because we're talking about AI here. We're not talking about static models, at a given point of time, and then you kind of lose onto what happens through time on data and on decisions. How would you think of that from a technological perspective?
Adaptability is fundamental. And in my view, adaptability is about the AI models that adapt over time, and about the data that is generated maybe from previous decisions across time, right? So we go from a diachronic view of AI to a synchronic view of AI through time.
Mm-hmm.
And a framework such as reinforcement learning, for instance, is very helpful for this paradigm of decision making across time. Time series analysis becomes crucial, and the user should have the flexibility on using AI-based decision making versus random decisions on smaller portions of data. So, for example, Zinia allows users to trade off between optimization and exploration, generating data to optimize over certain metrics, over certain goals, and generating data to better extract information. Fundamentally, we go back to the principles that we emphasized earlier of simplicity, flexibility, explainability, and, as I said just now, adaptability to time and to actions as cornerstones and bedrocks of the AI platform that is Zinia, for AI to be made more accessible and used effectively across businesses, functions, and goals. And of course, there are specific technologies that can deliver these principles, but the technology will keep improving over time. And again, flexibility is a core aspect that Zinia will present. And ultimately, AI approaches should accommodate for the availability of such improved technology over time. And we plan for Zinia to evolve in the future alongside these improvements of AI technology.
Great. So, essentially we have established that for democratizing AI, for simplifying it, and for it to be freed from technical silos and go, for it to go into business functions, if you detach the technology layer, there are 4 key principles: simplicity, flexibility, explainability, and self-adaptability. And you quite nicely also gave us some technological solutions that a platform like Zinia is using to deliver on these principles. But technology will keep changing, and the key thing is for us to, or for whoever who wants to really take AI to the masses, to use the technologies available in the day and deliver on these key principles. That's probably where the holy grail of making AI accessible to everyone lies, right?
That's correct.
Great. Thanks for your time. It's been a great discussion. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.